You see, the word cult implies that a thing either is or is not a cult. Among sociologists who study cults, they recognize that there's a spectrum of control. And the most important thing about a cult that identifies a group as a cult is the amount of control that they exercise over their members' lives. So when we talk about cults, what we really want to use is the word high control group. A high control group, as a word, implies a spectrum, as there is. There's your average group. There's a group that has more control over its members' lives, and more control until you're a cult, and finally you're in Kool-Aid land. So, high control group. Now, we're going to be discussing some of the behaviors that these groups use to control their members, because while different cults or different groups, high control groups, have different beliefs, the techniques they use are all about the same. The beliefs are all different, the techniques are all the same. So we're going to be looking at some of these techniques through the lens of Stephen Hassan, his BITE model. Stephen Hassan was an ex-Moonie who is now a cult counselor, an exit counselor, and he speaks extensively on cults. So the BITE model is very useful. BITE stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. When a group is controlling all of these things, you better start watching out. So first, behavior control. So every group has teachings for how a person should behave. Some of those go as far as thou shalt not and thou shalt. However, when a group gets to the point where they can sit you down and punish you, that's when you got to start watching out. Punishment is a thing to watch for. In the Jehovah's Witnesses, they could actually disfellowship you, which meant that no one could talk to you anymore. Your friends, your family, your social network. A good Jehovah's Witness did make friends among worldly people or non-Jehovah's Witnesses, taught not to, which is also a red flag. So if you were disfellowshipped, you didn't just lose your religion, you lost your friends, you lost your family. Now a group that can do that, that claims that sort of power, has an immense amount of what we call undue influence on people's lives. That is, they can take away your freedom and control you. If you go on any ex-Jehovah's Witness recovery board, you can find a lot of people using fake names, aliases. Why do they have to do that? Because they have to protect themselves. That is, they're still in the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're still in the group. They don't believe it anymore. But they have to stay undercover for fear of losing their friends and family. That's not a religion. That's a hostage situation. Another thing, massive commitments of time. Luna Fleshner, author of Recovering Agency, Piercing the Veil of Mormon Mind Control, estimates that a good Mormon can spend 22 hours a week doing the things that they are supposed to do. Among the Jehovah's Witnesses, about the same. When you have that much time invested in something, it keeps you so busy that you don't have time to think and consider whether you're being controlled. Information control. Now, a good group wants to see its members grow. Even if that growth leads you to move out of it. Here at Toastmasters, this group can be, a cult can be, or a high control group can be any kind of group, not just religion. But here at Toastmasters, if you grow to the point where you don't need Toastmasters anymore, you said, hey guys, I've gotten what I wanted, what I came here for, I'm good, and you leave, we're not going to cross the street when we see you coming. We're not going to turn our backs on you. We're not going to say, shun the unbeliever. But a high control group needs control. So they actually don't want you to learn. They want to restrict your access to outside information. In the Jehovah's Witnesses, College, higher education was looked down upon, heavily discouraged. Looking at criticism from outside the group also. And you could be disfellowshipped for talking to someone who had been disfellowshipped, someone who wasn't a witness anymore. That was enough. When someone can control who you are allowed to talk to, that's scary. Thought control. They'll put things in your mind through constant repetition that cause you to stop thinking about things. Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust not in your own understanding." This verse was used and is used by cults quite a bit to keep people in fear of thinking for themselves, to shut it down. So you'd have things repeated like the truth. That's what we call the religion, the truth. So that if you were thinking about leaving, well, how could you leave the truth? As soon as the concern comes up, the shield comes down through that constant repetition, thought control. Emotion control, guilt. You are sinful. You are not good enough, never will be. If cults had a toolbox, the hammer, the go-to tool for knocking things into place, would be guilt. It's used extensively. It's a very effective tool in any kind of abusive relationship, which being in a high control group certainly is. You can keep people down, keep them feeling bad about themselves. They won't stand on their feet and get out. So that's used extensively. Those are just a couple of techniques. I could go on for quite a bit. But I'm going to steal a page from Jeff Foxworthy. You'll remember his, "You might be a redneck, you might be in a cult." If there are people who have the right to punish you, you might be in a cult. If thinking for yourself is a suspect activity, if they're allowed to tell you who you are allowed to talk to, you might be in a cult. Carla Giambavlo points out the panacea for this, the cure. She says, "I know of no better way to recover than to learn the techniques that a cult uses to control its members." I believe that's worked for me. Fellow Toastmasters, thank you.